Malonina tamana mana matu I Callao. New hila mau he tailia mo yetahi maino te pahiuika. I te taimi nei lava kohi mau ai te ava o Callao, Lima, Peru. Tēnei te ava na kau mai na tino mai te pahiuika I na wakanga aoi I te tauihanga tahi walo Honolua. So at the moment we are in Lima, Peru, at the port of Callao. This is the port where about 3,100 Polynesians were brought as essentially slaves in the years 1861 through to 1863. So in Peru here it had been made illegal to have Chinese slaves, African slaves or indigenous slaves. So some of the landowners began to try and work out a loophole to get around this and went to the islands of the sea to recruit workers for their plantations and mines and so forth. And so 1861 the first raid happened in about December in the island of Rapa Nui, Easter Island, and then subsequent raids happened on some of the same ships. About 14 recruitment ships went around the Pacific in 1862. So about 3,600 were taken originally, but about 500 never even made it to Peru. They died of disease or despair on the boats in the unsanitary conditions in the hold. So about 3,100 came through the port, and they were in Peru for about 2 or 3 years. So the islands that were particularly hit hard were Nuku'ulai and Tuvalu. All three of the atolls of Tokelau, about 80% of the men were taken on the island of Atahu. There were only 6 men left. So there was a generation that essentially grew up without fathers. And then other islands of course as well. So Tongareva, many men and women left the island of Tongareva or Penryn Island in the Northern Cooks. So the women were sent to work as domestic servants here. And Ata in Tonga was hit hard, so much so the king was worried that a subsequent raid may take the rest of the population. So he repopulated the people from the island of Ata to Ewa. Niuwha'o in northern Tonga was hit. And then of course Rapa Nui was hit about 3 or 4 times, and about 1,407 people were taken from the island of Rapa Nui, Easter Island, out of a population of probably about 4,000. So the islanders, losing so much of them, and many of the nobles and educated Rapa Nui, we lost a lot of information and history that we would have had just from that those original slave raids. So women were put to work here, the few women that were brought from the islands, as I've said, as domestic servants, men in plantations, farms, and also the guano mines on the Chicha Islands, about 3 hours south of here off the coast of Pisco. About 3 years later, or 1864, the Peruvian government started worrying about what was happening with these recruitments and made it illegal to have Polynesian migrant workers, as they were called, and they began a repatriation scheme. Out of the 3,100, they found 260 survivors. So many would have died of exposure to new diseases at the hands of their cruel owners. Some may have died of despair, but they began to bring together these repatriates, and they started to take them on, I think it was 2 trips back to the islands. Out of the 1,400 Rapa Nui that were taken, 15 were found, and they left for Rapa Nui on a ship which happened to leave the same day an American whaler had come in on quarantine with smallpox, and so they took smallpox unwittingly back to Rapa Nui with them, and that killed a further 1,000 people from the epidemic that happened then. So more people were actually killed in the repatriation than the slave raid. There were probably 1,500 people killed in that, and that's why there are so many mysteries. So much information on the culture had been lost, not only from the slave raid but also the repatriation. Also, the 3 remaining Tokelauans were taken with the rest of the islanders back to the island of Rapa in southern French Polynesia. Rapa Nui was named by Tahitians in the 1860s after Rapa Iti, or Rapa, in southern French Polynesia, and so that was essentially the end of the road for the repatriation. Anyone else that wanted to try and get back to their islands had to try and find their own way. And so 2 of them went on to have descendants on the island. I'm talking about Tokelauans. That was Taupe and Lolohala. There was also Hehea Hola, or Hehea Hola, we don't really know how his name was pronounced, who remained on the island of Rapa until 1924. He managed to make it back to Hakaoho. Yes, there are Tokelauan descendants on the island of Rapa, not to be confused with Rapa Nui. We arrived and spent 1 year on Rapa Nui and tried to find out if there were descendants of Tokelauans there, and the genealogy expert, or ngapa expert of Rapa Nui, had never heard of it. And we've since been able to determine that those Tokelauans actually went to Rapa Iti, or Rapa. And this story is probably just a case of misidentity, because in 1985, the Festival of Pacific Arts, several people from Rapa went and approached Tokelauans and said, "We are part Tokelauan. Our ancestors were repatriates from the slave raids on our island of Rapa." And because the Tokelauans probably didn't know of this island, they assumed it was Rapa Nui, and so the story has spread around the Tokelauan community that there are Tokelauans in Rapa Nui. So Callao, a pretty significant part of Pacific history. At 3,000 people coming into this port from Polynesia is just a drop in the bucket here. It's not even a significant event. But at the other end of the ocean, these slave raids over these 3 years have had long-lasting effects on Pacific Island people and their history.